Hey there, we are getting so close to finishing up this 40-day journey that we've been on. We're going to start chapter 12 today. Chapter 12 is called Beholding God's Goodness at the Table. It may come as a surprise to anyone who's known me for some time, but I had almost no cooking skills when I first became a wife. I remember, to my embarrassment, how fascinated I was with Hamburger Helper because I had not yet understood how to cook from scratch or how they made that box mix so mysteriously tasty. Then, slowly but surely, I fell in love with serving home-cooked meal to a table full of guests. Those were the days before readily accessible online recipe archives, when aspiring cooks dog-eared magazines and smudged cookbook pages with molten lava cake batter. I couldn't wait to try out new techniques, brown butter, discover new ingredients like creme fraiche, or refer to simple mixtures of carrots, onions, and celery as mirepoix. So fancy. The skies of the culinary world opened up and the savory seas of homemade chicken stock parted. I was smitten with the kitchen. So, who then was that woman yesterday afternoon who stood in front of my refrigerator and moaned yet another meal that needed prepping for the 7 guys who live in my house? There is a difference between culinary curiosity and consistently serving meals day in and day out at the table. One showcases skill and amuses the palate, and the other, while able to do the same, is most often a display of dedication, perseverance, and sacrifice. The children of Israel understood something of repetition with no end in sight. Just 3 days after God performed one of the most memorable and powerful acts in the Bible, such as the parting of the Red Sea, through which his people had safe passage and rescue, these same children began to complain, fearing the lack of water and food in the desert. How often we're vowed by God's goodness not only to find ourselves moaning and persevering in it. God had delivered the Israelites from slavery and promised them their own home, a land flowing with milk and honey. But first, he led them out into the desert for 40 years to show them who he was and how he would provide for them. God had limitless options for providing food for his people, but he chose to demonstrate his provision one day at a time. No more, no less. He wanted his children to anticipate his faithfulness, to receive it, to gather it, to feast from it, and to repeat the process the very next day, breaking only for the Sabbath. I've often thought about this passage. The Lord did that not because it was too hard for him to meal plan. It wasn't too hard for the Lord to provide more than they needed. It wasn't too hard for the Lord to provide variety, but he chose to do it in this way, not because he needed to go through that situation. He needed the people to go through that situation. And so many times when we look at circumstances that come our way that we aren't so happy about, we forget to realize that there's a process that the Lord's trying to teach us through that circumstance. And as something as simple and as unimportant as food's important, but not in the whole scheme of things, really. What we eat is not as important as many other things in the world, provided we just aren't starving to death. It doesn't really matter that much. And he chose something that was really insignificant in the whole scheme of things, and because of the way that they acted, many of them, weren't as God wasn't as proud of them maybe as he could have been. I'll say it that way. Let me read you the place in the Bible where this story is found. You can read the whole story. You guys probably know it. But we can learn from the story and realize the little things, the big things and the little things, are not for God's benefit, they're for ours. And so we have to see what we can learn from it. Let me read. It's Exodus 16, and she has here verses 4, and then she jumps down to 6 and 7. Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. Most of us don't grumble in our spirit because we lack food, as we throw out unused groceries that have gone bad, but because we lack gratitude. The Israelites were the same. Their grumbling did not ultimately reveal their fear of hunger as much as it revealed their faulty focus. Their faithful God miraculously made a way for their rescue, but they could only see their empty stomachs. Our God graciously makes it possible for us to not just dine, but to dine with pleasure. Yet so often we fixate what it takes for us to gather. We miss the provision when we don't behold the provider, that we might know that it was the Lord who sustained us in times of famine and plenty. This is the reason we gather, serve, and feast by day. Friend, your faithfulness to take what He's given and remind your household to take and eat has nothing to do with the creme fraiche or the mirepoix. We can feast on beans and rice or steak because the Lord provides it, and we've been given the opportunity to taste and see that He is good. She has, let me show you this here. She's got some really cool things here that, I don't know, you might want to try this. I think like her, we try to look so much for, some people like to just get so fancy and so elaborate that we miss the simple and the sustaining things in life. And she's got here, I'll show you a picture, but then I'll read these to you guys. She's drawn like little garden vegetables and things like that. And then she's given you suggestions on how you can maybe come out of that thinking you need more idea. She says, serve store-bought donuts, which I do that all the time anyway. Spontaneously make room for guests. Invite a guest over without putting up the laundry. That takes something for me. Open your door and just go meet your neighbor. We do live in a society where we don't do that. And I think all that she's trying to get us to do is just take your focus off of the food itself and begin to start looking at the other things that go along, especially around a meal. The things that can be learned around a meal, the fellowship around a meal. Here at our church on Wednesday nights, we eat together each Wednesday, those that can. Number one, it helps the working family that does want to be a part of a weekly Bible study have an opportunity to feed their families as well as be a part of a group of believers and fellowship with them. And I will tell you, that is probably one of my favorite times of the week, because I don't always get to sit down and eat with people, but the times that I do, I'm busy here at the church sometimes on Wednesday nights, but the times that I get to sit down and just sit and visit and fellowship, it is some of the sweetest conversations. And I don't know, there is something about food that is, it's an icebreaker, and it also is a way just to, I guess, enjoy the provision that the Lord has provided. It's a way for Him to demonstrate His faithfulness on a daily basis. When we eat on a daily basis, if we can look at it, we talked about this in the very beginning, of the study, seeing Him in everything, seeing Him in the sun when it comes up in the morning, and when you go to the grocery store, you see Him in the person that plowed the ground to build that store. And so in our day-to-day routines, such as feeding our families and cooking for our families and preparing food, it's not so much what it is as much as it is what goes around the idea of fellowship. You know, I think the Israelites get a bad rap because they often get talked about because they complained 3 days after the miracle, but really, I don't know that we always even see the miracles as they come. And so I don't know that we can really, talk bad about the Israelites. They didn't do anything different than we probably do all the time. Anyway, that is all of that first part of chapter 12. The second part that we'll read tomorrow is becoming, share the feast. And that's probably a little bit more where this invite your neighbor over thing is going to be spearheaded. I don't have anything out of the journal today, other than just one thing. It says here that, and I'll put this in the notes, this is just the only thing I was going to leave you with, and it goes with the scripture from Exodus. It says, pause for a moment and ask God to reveal areas where you are missing the provision because you've taken your eyes off the provider. And as I pondered that a little bit, I thought it could even be it could be a lot of things. It's not just food. He's provided so much for us, and it's not just material things either. When you stop and look at just creation and our bodies and how they function and how He provides a way for everything our body needs, even that in itself is just so miraculous. And so anyway, I'll put that little comment in the notes. It's just something for you to ponder a little bit. I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.